is that darn Cardi Jew? They're making us ravenous look horrible.
If you've enjoyed this program, please click like and subscribe.
Shalom and welcome again to a special edition of the Torah Watchman Show International, available to YouTube subscribers for free. This video is hosted by none other than Hakam ben-Emmett. All my subscribers know who I am. I'm a Gulf War disabled veteran, combat veteran of the United States Air Force of 20 years. Have had multiple active duty deployments around the world. Also, I would like to announce formally my political aspirations to run for a member of the Knesset, a coalition seat as a member of the Knesset known as MK. People might think I am pulling their leg on this. No, I'm very passionate about Israel. I'm moving my family to Ashdod within about 6 or more years, very soon. This is my retirement plan. But I don't plan necessarily to go out to the pasture and shepherd sheep, even though that's a pleasurable thought to me after all the stressful work I've done in my many years of age since 16. Yes, I've been working since I was 16 and paying taxes since that time too. It is easy to criticize from afar, right? But it's also hypocritical. If you are a proud Zionist Jew in the United States, and there's a growing number of us, by the way, more than has been in other years, and you see what's happening in Israel, you see the disastrous government planning that's led to the murder of 1,200 of my Jewish brothers and sisters, all civilians, hundreds of hostages taken by the terrorist group Hamas, many of them murdered, women raped and tortured, abominable acts to corpses, things that are considered too vile and contemptible even for the Nazi SS at World War II. What happened on October 7th was a grim reminder that the words never again really don't mean anything. Because we don't have a government we put in power, will of the people in Israel, that really cares about anything other than business, world business, making more agreements with Gentile and Arab states and other nations that is strictly forbidden in the Torah, that actually benefits them more than the Jewish people back at home. It's easy to criticize, right? I don't like Benjamin Netanyahu as Prime Minister of Israel, right? I don't like what the chief of staff of the IDF is saying. Their core values are not my core values. It goes on and on and on. It's easier to criticize when you're in the diaspora, like in the United States, living pretty much, there's a lot of crime and miserable circumstances here economically too in some neighborhoods, but it's easier to live in the United States as a Jew and an Orthodox Arrow, for instance. My daughter does not have a bulletproof bus. We don't have bomb shelters we have to retreat to every time missiles fly overhead. We don't have that siren going off as another terrorist attack. We don't understand, many of us, if we've never been to Israel, don't have any association with Israel, and many secular Jews in America, being buried in Israel is the last thought they have, right? But I want to do something different. I want to do something transformational. Now, you know, I teach Torah lectures on my channel primarily. I talk about Jewish history in a lecture format from a scientific mind. I've never run for politics, but running for an MK seat is my aspiration right now. That passion is building within me, and my party platform is taking shape in my mind. So what I actually did, I put pen to paper and made an enumerated list of policies and bills and other legislation that I intend to build a coalition of like-minded Jews in Israel. I will focus primarily on American Jews because we tend to think the same way. If we'll do American Israeli citizens, then we can actually vote in either election. And that's a huge power base. If you don't like what's happening in the United States, like today, under the current administration, well, next time you have a presidential election, you can vote for a different president, right? In Israel, even though you have a popular vote idea and you have coalitions based on the old British Empire parliamentary system since 1948, a little bit before that, some candidates that has a majority coalition of people that want them to be voted on, you know, who has the greatest coalition, coalition, wins a majority seat, like Likud, for instance, and the Yamina Party, and others that come together, even though they usually fight, but they can come together, even Arab Party sometimes. You know, they win the majority vote in the Knesset for moving various legislation and policies on. But no, in Israel, we're stuck with basic law, essentially is our so-called constitution, but it's very weak. The Supreme Court has more power than the Prime Minister oftentimes in the Knesset. As you know, as being an American Jew, you know, fighting in the military, taking an oath of allegiance to defend the Constitution from enemies within and without, our civil rights of 1967, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., of blessed memory, that says all men are created equal in the image of God. Despite the color of your face, gender, ethnicity, we're all created equal and should have the same equality in a weighted tier of Department of Justice framework, you know. I'm not going to give you a lesson on the United States constitutional government. You can look it up. But if you're an Israeli Jew and you speak only Hebrew, you write only in Hebrew, you may watch CNN or Fox News or something just from an interest point. You may be a little bit isolated what's happening in government. It may seem kind of strange to you, especially if you're a young person born in Israel and you've never been abroad. Well, I've been abroad. I've traveled to other countries, lived in Japan nearly 4 years. So I'm familiar with other forms of government. Now, I may not believe in what the Department of Justice of today or the executive branch or what's happening between our House of Representatives and the Senate. You know, I may not believe there's justice there or equality with all the corrupt lobbying and everything else that gets in the way of the will of the people. There's no term limits anymore. The states have given up, abrogated their rights, you know, to the federal government to rule over them. But, you know, the U.S. Constitution, by its intent, our framers, and I'm talking about Thomas Jefferson, I'm talking about Benjamin Franklin, and many, many others of well-known, great reputation. They were God-fearing men. Some were deists, some were atheists, but some were chaplain. Like George Washington was the first chaplain appointed by the British Empire at that time. What I'm saying, just like I say to my American friends, we need to get back to the basics, folks. We need to get back to reading, writing, arithmetic in public schools. We need to have the right to pray in our schools. It was taken out by a liberal activist Supreme Court with a misinterpretation of our freedom of speech and freedom of religious expression. We have a lot of benefits being American, but in Israel, those benefits and entitlements are not guaranteed. So let's get started. These are my preliminary recommendations to be one day a member of the Knesset, to have a seat in the Knesset. Number one, establish a reform Kach Party to consider all recommendations by Rabbi Meir Kahane and build a coalition frame of government. In other words, combine with the Yamina Party, Torah Party, I would say right of center parties, other parties that are like to get that together for some sort of majority vote. Now I know in 1994, I believe, maybe, yeah, in that time frame, before Rabbi Kahane was brutally murdered by an American Saudi Arabian Al-Qaeda affiliate in the United States, the FBI and Benjamin Clinton, I believe, yeah, it was 94, they recommended to Israel to pass legislation to declare the Kach Party as a terrorist party, as an illegal party that's not allowed to operate. Many people in Israel have tried to reestablish that, like a secretary, I believe, several years ago, the secretary for Rabbi Kahane, when he was a member of the Knesset, I think only one term of office. He was not allowed. The Supreme Court said he's too close to the Kach Party. But there's more and more Jews right now, I've noticed, that share the world vision of Rabbi Kahane more than Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I wonder why. Most of the things Rabbi Kahane, and I did videos of this, I'm not going to do a dissertation on Rabbi Kahane. You can look it up yourself. Tons of information out there. I think he was a futurist. I think he was a prophet in his own right, because most everything he warned Israel, if this and this and this was not implemented or changed or carried out in Israel's Knesset and their government, bad things would happen in the future, near future. And you look how many wars and conflicts have occurred since Rabbi Kahane essentially gave his life for his positions to put the Jew first and the only Jewish nation on the planet, which is Eretz Israel. So this is going to be a reformed view of the Kach Party, not a strict Torah-centered Kach Party, because that's not sustainable at this time for many, many reasons. I'm not going to get into that. But basically, what Rabbi Kahane said to be true for protecting the Jews, and say, whatever we need to do to achieve the ultimate goal of never again a Jewish life to be shed by an act of terrorism, let's do it. Let's do it, whatever it takes. Number 2, pass a bill to institute a written constitution based upon the United States framers. Who are the framers? Again, I told you the initial people that started with the Federalist Papers, which eventually became the essential federal government that even Benjamin Franklin had problems with. He said there's too much power, but the Federalist Papers proposed a government that didn't have enough power. So there had to be power sharing between a central federal government in the District of Columbia, close to where I live, and 50 states that have individual constitutions that are based on the master template, which is U.S. Constitution. Now, it's rather complicated. I'm not going to get into that. What I'm saying is that our Constitution, bar none, it's been proven the very best written document ever in history. I mean, you go back to Persia, and they had, I can't remember all the information, but they had something very similar about equality of every person, rights given to people, fair trial, and things of this nature. These things have been argued forever, But what I'm saying is our Constitution is only as good as the responsible legal authorities, the circuit judges, the Department of Justice, local DAs over every city, in every state, as ethical as they are, and enforcing the Constitution, and having a Supreme Court, more importantly, that actually does not legislate from the bench on their opinions, or like South Africa's Constitution, for instance. We like what they say better than what Benjamin Franklin said. You interpret verbatim the founder's intent of the Constitution in these very difficult legal quandaries, okay? Like the 14th Amendment, anchor baby laws, everyone illegal, a woman is crosses our border illegally from Mexico pregnant, she drops her child, I hate to be crude, but that becomes an American citizen based on slavery legislation just after the Civil War in the 1860s. The 14th Amendment was basically said that the children of slaves living in the country were allowed to be American citizens. It's completely out of context of what's happening, and is abused. And just like Roe versus Wade, whether you believe in full-term abortion or not, that's debatable politically from right to left. There's a lot of people in Tel Aviv, for instance, were for partial birth abortion and complete abortion rights for every woman. There's 600,000 Jewish children that were murdered by the Nazis, and we're talking about a woman's right in Tel Aviv, a Jewish woman's right to abort her child because it's inconvenient. I'm not going to go there any further, but I'm just saying these are examples of laws that were declared by our Supreme Court as unconstitutional, like Roe versus Wade, and recently affirmative action was declared unconstitutional, and President Obama's so-called DACA executive order was unconstitutional. Okay? This is what a Supreme Court should do. How's the Supreme Court formed? How it is in the United States, the President of the United States, if there's a vacancy coming available very soon, they nominate someone, but a president cannot say, absolutely, I want this person or this person. Without any kind of legislative process, Congress has to approve it and even have trials and inquiries on this official. That's what the beauty of our democracy is, when people do their job. This is what I want for Israel. This is where I'm getting at. When I talk about, I want to throw out the old British Empire parliamentary system, the status quo kind of thing, basic law kind of thing. Throw it out. It should have gone out a long time ago. It's not even compatible with modern society and modern political life for the Jewish people. Use a master template that's worked for the United States for more than 200 years. Better for worse, it is the very best Constitution written. And God had his anointing upon those founding fathers who wrote it and made it work. Okay? Number 3, pass a bill to institute a Jewish Bill of Rights. What is that? Well, in addition to a written Constitution, I emphasize written, not said, not implied, not whispered in someone's ear, not something discussed in a closed, dark conference room in the dead of night that no one else has heard about. A written Constitution. We have a written Bill of Rights, okay? We have a written Bill of Rights for civil governance, right? These rights are given to the state. These rights are given to the federal government about how everyone should pursue happiness in our country. It's listed in a Bill of Rights. I want a Jewish Bill of Rights for the only Jewish nation on the planet. Now, I understand there are Arabs that are living, and Christians and Druze and everyone, Buddhists, other people from Ethiopia in there. And they don't care about being Jewish, but they live there, they're workers and everything else. I understand that. But it is a Jewish country going back 3,500 years ago. If you want to be on the safe side, 3,000 years ago, King David conquered the old Hittite city, Canaanite city of Salem, and made it Jerusalem. This is proven through archaeological evidence, scientific evidence, historical evidence, not my opinion, and not any other Jew's opinion. It's proven. We've discovered all of these things fairly recently, too, since the founding of Israel in 1948. So the Jewish Bill of Rights is much needed. In other words, does a Jew have a right to bear arms, a firearm, that kind of thing? What rights do they have in court? Between area north and south, or east or west in Israel? How they should be treated? Other things like that impact their general civil rights. We had the Civil Rights Act passed by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., blessed memory, in 1964, and several amendments to that. When President Trump was in office, December 2019, he added language for anti-Semitism in public supported universities in America. In other words, stop supporting federal funds to schools that do nothing about issues of anti-Semitism, okay, that kind of thing. Everyone knows what the status quo is. This essentially is Benjamin Netanyahu's party platform. Every time he runs, I will not break the status quo. Jordan, King Abdullah, right now is accusing Israel, like he likes to do all the time. The radical he has become, his parliament there is full of Islamic extremists and terrorists. They really are. 75% of Jordan is Palestinian, aka Hamas. They really are. He's accusing the government of Israel right now for breaking the status quo. Why? Because, recently on Yom Yerushalayim Day, Jews wanted to carry flags through Damascus Gate. They wanted to carry flags up to Temple Mount. Rabbinate people wanted to wear tefillin on, as a symbol of prayer, silent prayer on Israel, on Har HaBayit. Anything that the Jews want to do in their city, in their national capital, recognize that President Trump and many other countries since his term in office, he did that. He moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, formally. And other nations followed suit. They moved their embassies to Jerusalem too. The haters of Israel will continue to do stupid things like open up Palestinian embassies and then agreeing among themselves without passing anything through the UN, the United Nations Council, that we recognize a Palestinian state in Israel, even after all the horrific things that happened on October 7th and leading up to that. The status quo is an unwritten policy, essentially says that in 1994, when Benjamin Clinton, President Clinton, forced a peace treaty upon Israel at that time, after all the disputes after 1967, when about 300,000 Palestinians left the West Bank, you heard me, and went back to where they came from in Jordan. That's where Palestine came from. Jordan, they went across the Jordan River. We have complete control of all 5 Jewish holy sites in Israel at that time. We had a complete access and prayer and everything else to Har Habit, Temple Mount. We did. There were no issues with the tomb of Yosef in Shechem, for instance. And those have been recently, Hasidim went there. Israel press calls them extremists, and they were essentially were detained and arrested for causing a ruckus because Palestinians attacked them. Because it's controlled by the Palestinian administration. Not wanting to get on the details there, but briefly there was ABC area security zone. Some Israel had military right for that land, and some of them was shared, and others had absolute Palestinian rule. Well, we gave all but Har Habit to the Palestinian administration, namely the Grand Mufti in Jordan, to control on the Palestinian administration. In other words, if they say that we're going to lock down Har Habit for the time of Ramadan, no Jews allowed to go there during the Islamic, high holiday that comes every year, and sometimes at times it coincides with Jewish high holidays too. We have no rights to the temple. We have no rights to these areas here. And then the IDF so-called core values, they weigh between Palestinian rights and Jewish rights, and they relegate Jews that live in so-called previously Palestinian-controlled areas as settlers and not citizens of Israel. I'm not telling you anything. If you're an Israeli, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, and it really keeps you awake at night like it does, and really frustrates the hell out of you. Okay? Let's move forward. Dissolve the status quo. It's not a written, legal binding document. In fact, it was completely been broken apart by the King of Jordan, the Grand Mufti. Since 1994, 5 mosques were built on Har Habit, and that was a direct violation of the status quo. They have done many other things, like squatters and occupying Jewish-controlled areas that I told you, A, B, and C, in 1994 in the peace treaty with Jordan. They've taken advantage of that, and that's not been arbitrated or disputed in the Knesset effectively. So what happens, Palestinians steal land that was guaranteed by international treaty, like namely the United States and Jordan. They get to steal the land away and get away with it and build mosques on Temple Mount, and they're not allowed to do that because they're considered an international historical heritage site, okay? By multiple world religions. So number 5, to address these issues, pass a bill for freedom of speech and religious expression on Temple Mount for both Jew, Gentile, and Arab. You heard me right. 3 world religions and isolation for Jews on Temple Mount during Ramadan. In other words, in the isolation of Jews on Temple Mount in Ramadan. Have the Arabs go to Mecca for Ramadan. They used to do that before they got into a civil war a long time ago. The whole thing is about Al-Aqsa Mosque there, but historically Al-Aqsa Mosque was never built on Temple Mount. Muhammad never went to Israel, and the mosque they call Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is actually premeditatedly built upon the Holy of Holies, where King Solomon's temple was. Don't want to get into all of that. I have videos on that. They call it Al-Aqsa Mosque, and it was built long after Muhammad died. And all the stories about him flying from the near side to the farther side and everything else, It only makes sense historically if this happened in Saudi Arabia. Listen, don't doubt me for saying that, because other Muslim scholars have said the same thing. In the status quo, demand equal access for prayer. I have no problem in having observant Jews in Shechem sacrificing a red heifer and taking its ashes and spreading them about ceremoniously upon the people of Israel standing on Temple Mount. Simple things like this. As long as we don't treat our Arab brothers and cousins there with ill repute when they're trying their best to live peacefully with us. That's where I'm going. Build a bridge of peace. Teach your children not to hate children of other races and creeds. And we can all say amen with that. So in the isolation of Jews on Temple Mount during the Islamic holidays, establish security perimeters for all gates and entry points using metal and optical scanners. Ari Fool, my beloved friend who was murdered about 5 years ago by a Palestinian youth that was filled with hatred of Israel from a speech he heard by Mahmoud Abbas speaking at a PLO conference. Ari Fool wanted to bring back the capital punishment, the death penalty, which is already on the books since the 70s, since we hung the last Nazi there. He also wanted to establish metal detectors on the gate, so if you had a knife or explosive device or something on you, the alarm would go off, it would be recorded, and then it would notify local authorities to do something for egress of civilians or danger and things like that. Well, temporarily, after a number of Druze soldiers were murdered there by Islamists, Bibi went and installed metal detectors, but again, the king of Jordan, the Grand Mufti, cried foul, you're breaking the status quo by making these changes. So what did Bibi do? As the coward and spineless Jew he is, remove the metal detectors, and Ari Fool spoke about this on his show before he was murdered. Bring back the death penalty, and we're getting to this. Okay? Pass a bill to annex, and we talked about this all the time, annex all of northern and all of southern Israel for Jewish settlement. We call it settlers. Well, pass a law to allow us to settle anywhere in northern Israel, West Bank, Negev, Judea, East Coast, West Coast, wherever. Settle there in the land, but put it under complete IDF and IF military control for continuous monitoring to make sure that both Jew and Arab can live peacefully. In other words, end the stupid fighting between Jewish settlers, sheep herders, and Arab over water rights and things of this nature, where Arabs actually try to kill the Jews when they try to take their sheep to other grazing pastures. A lot of that's happening right now over disputed territory. End the nonsense. Annex the land. It's been ours. If someone wants to accuse us of being an apartheid state, take all the historical record, all the archaeological evidence, have scientists or PhDs go to the UN or wherever and testify, this land is our land. That land is your land. Jews are from Judea. Arabs are from Arabia. It's that simple. If they get into kind of dispute, the person who can historically prove they were native to the land, the earlier point in time, the epoch of time, should win the final settlement argument in court. This leads to my next statements here. Pass a bill to expand the funding, complete funding, for the right of return to include Jews born of Jewish fathers, not Jewish mothers. Right now, I think we have a grandparent agreement or something like that. I'm not sure. They can show that you have a Jewish grandmother, you're in, and you don't have to prove that you went through Orthodox or conservative conversion or whatever, okay? But this is a big issue for Khardi Jews, my Khardi brothers and sisters in Israel. They were denigrated, demonized by rabbinites, going all the way back to the 12th and 13th, 14th century, for daring to say we believe in Torah tradition, that our surnames come from our father. This was changed the first century by a rabbi 2,000 years ago to be on the mother. Listen, just end the nonsense. If you can prove that you are ethnically from a Jewish father or mother, or a Jewish grandfather or grandmother, you should be considered Jewish. Okay? There are Jews that are Kohen and 100% Holocaust. People died in the Holocaust in their family, and they hate the Torah. They revile Israel, and they joined these Peace Now groups and everything else to stand against Israel. They're the most filthy, rotten Jews you can imagine. Baal Teshuvahs make the best kind of Jew. That's me. Okay, moving forward. Dissolve the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and the Palestinian administration. This means that Mahmoud Abbas is fired, his house and property is seized, he's given the opportunity to leave Israel or remain in Israel, but under new Jewish authority and new Jewish rules. He will not ever be able to run for political parties again. The Palestinians will never have a state in Israel. That trial with Hamas and the Palestinians in Gaza in 2005, 2007, would prove disastrous for Israel. And it shouldn't be embarrassing the United States government that's still pushing it upon the nation of Israel today. The Jewish people are sick and tired of this nonsense. Okay? Make Hamas illegal. Make the Al-Aqsa brigades, the other Islamic subgroups there, Mother Brotherhood, make them all illegal to operate as a political entity, especially to fill a Knesset seat. Illegal. But you cannot do that unless you have a Jewish Bill of Rights and a written constitution. Do you see where I'm going? As far as the Supreme Court, we'll get to that next. Number 9, order immediate review of all Israeli national ID cards, the blue cards that say you're a citizen. When I moved my family in about 6 years to Israel at an Aliyah approved package there, I was given an opportunity to declare my intent to be an Israeli citizen and keep my American citizenship intact. Okay? And I will be issued that blue national ID card. Okay? I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe someone can tell me in feedback of this video. It'll be on YouTube soon. What kind of background check does? You have the Mossad intelligence apparatus in Israel. You don't have an FBI per se. I don't know what kind of investigative background checks they do. They may work with the United States and other governments. The U.S. actually does a lot of intel sharing in Egypt. I don't know why. I don't know why they do working with Egypt or Turkey. But everyone who is not a Jew by birth in Israel are approved for an Aliyah package to Israel in which they will be, the end goal is to be awarded a national ID card of citizenship, like your national passport per se. If you're not that, if you're not a Jew, if you're an Arab, a Palestinian, a Gentile, Christian, some other immigrant that has not shown any intent whatsoever to abide by the Jewish Constitution, Jewish Bill of Rights, or to be part of tribal Israel as a bona fide Jew, to join conversion and say, I love Israel, I pray for the peace of Jerusalem, I believe in the Holocaust, I believe in nationhood of Israel and its right to exist without being molested by his neighbors. Do a background check, because many of those background checks have failed miserably. I can't tell you how many cases in which a Palestinian has one of these blue cards. I'm not even talking about work visas and things like that. I don't know if they're green or whatever, you can correct me. But they committed acts of terrorism. So evidently someone is not doing their intel properly in vetting these people before you say they have a right to the same privileges and benefits as anyone born of a Jewish mother or father in Israel. Okay, that's where I'm going. Do a reassessment of the security of background checks giving nationhood rights, national status to non-Jews. Okay? This is something we're talking about in the United States. Okay? Our visa process is horribly broken in the United States. We have in Colombia, I think more than half of them are foreigners, foreign students, and they go there and they protest for Hamas. Every one of them should be expelled from school and deported out of this country. This is what I'm talking about. Why were they allowed in our country in the first place? Okay? Number 10, pass a bill to establish 3 departments of government to include an elected president. If you know the United States, we have what was known as a bicameral form of government. You have a legislative branch, you have the Senate, you have bills that originate like for money and things in the House. It goes to the Senate to be ratified, updated. It may go back to the House and go back and forth several times until it's ready and group consensus and say this bill is worthy to be considered law. Goes to the president. President decide to either sign it with mitigations or something or just veto it. But having the executive branch, having the legislative branch, and having the judicial branch is very, very important. We have actually a federal Department of Justice not doing their job very well today on the current administration in the United States, but still in the Constitution it says you will have these breakouts of government. Okay? This will require a bill to be approved by all coalition parties in the current parliamentary system before you transition this iterative process into a written constitutional system where you have 3 departments of federal government. That's where I'm going to. Look at what has worked successfully for more than 200 years in the United States and mirror those successes by our founding fathers' intent in Israel. By the way, newsflash, Jews in Israel and Jews here in America, Great Britain or United Kingdom, England does not like the Jewish people very much. They want a Palestinian state. They're pro-Hamas, incredibly liberal. Since the days of the Balfour Agreement, they are the worst of pots and smocks. I'm sorry if it's any, but it's true. London, I can just go on and on. Why do you want to have a government that honors them? Why? Break away from that. Remember the honor days of Ronald Reagan, right? Peace through strength. That's what I'm talking about. Take the very best examples of our presidents. We had a lot of good presidents in the past. We had a lot of horrible presidents until recently. Look at the very best, have group consensus and model after that, okay? There's plenty of congressmen that will love to go to Israel and teach us our frame of government, just like we did in Japan after World War II. Our military leaders actually wrote the Constitution for Japan, has worked pretty good since then, okay? Based on our model too, okay? So pass a bill to authorize capital punishment, the death penalty, for all premeditated forms of murder that can be proven in court by 2 witnesses of what the Torah says, DNA evidence. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a prosecutor, but whatever the evidence is proved without a shadow of a doubt, like a jury and that kind of thing. If you have an unanimous, everyone agrees that the indictments proposed against a person, this person murdered someone else, premeditation, they were not mentally ill, they were not under any influence, they did this, they planned it ahead of time, to think of that, and they're witness to this, that all that evidence presented to the jury, and then they present that to the judge, and the judge decides punishment. But I'm saying if there's ever a crime involving premeditation of murder, aka the numerous instances of terrorism in Israel, who's responsible for murdering the 1,200 civilians, many of them babies and women? Who's responsible for murdering our hostages? Who are these people? These are crimes against humanity and forms of genocide. But I'm talking about just murdering. Palestinians dropping a boulder over a high-rise to a car through the windshield and causing a car to go off the cliff. This is what I'm talking about. Stabbing in the back. Other forms of murder in Israel by Palestinians, by Arab extremists against the Jewish people. Finishing the final solution that Hitler failed miserably with. That's what I'm talking about. There is a lot of Palestinians, a lot of Arabs, Islamic extremists sitting and rotting in Israeli prisons right now. And the Israeli Jew is paying for them to be there, free room and board. If they committed murder, they have blood on their hands, then they're going to eventually get involved in some stupid prisoner exchange, right? Like has been going on in hostage taken in Israel. They set a horrible precedence there. Any Islamic terrorist group can capture Jewish civilians as hostages, and then they could use that as a negotiating policy to get their prisoners, monstrous terrorists, released from Israeli prisons. If they are guilty of murder, and a judge says they are guilty of murder, and they get, in prison for 20 years of life, give them the death penalty and get it over with. Let people decide how they want to do that. Public hanging was going on around 1974, the last Nazi that Mossad found and brought to Israel for justice. Okay? This is something else that Ari Fould wanted. I already mentioned this before. Existing capital cases that are that warrant more scrutiny, especially if they involve diplomatic statuses and things like that, like Mahmoud Abbas. How many murdered Jews is he actually responsible for indirectly? Think about it. Other organizations in Qatar. I mean, they are organizations foreign in foreign countries, like in Qatar and elsewhere, in Afghanistan, Iran, that are right now planning the wholesale murder of the Jewish people. Look what's happening in Hezbollah. There's going to be a new war there soon. These difficult diplomatic-related crimes should go to the Department of Justice to adjudicate and be handled at a local, like quasi-state level by district attorneys for certain cities. This is where I'm getting to. Number 12, you hear all the time, the chief of staff at IDF brags in their core values. This is not in our core values. For a Jew, for a Jewish reservist or sergeant, whatever, to go into the West Bank, there's a mosque there, they have a giant forest. That mosque was commandeered by terrorists, and they eradicated those terrorists, removed them out of there, that control that. During Hanukkah, to have a Jewish Hanukkah song. These reservists were detained and kicked out of the service for doing that, because they violated IDF core values. Like the radical Hasidim that dared to go to the holy tomb of Yosef and Shechem, that violated IDF core values too. Well, we need to redefine IDF core values to be in the Jewish Bill of Rights as civil rights, instead of something that they make up according to their leftist, Marxist, woke policy. That is what's happening in IDF in the command echelon. I'm not the only one saying this. I'm preaching to the choir, don't shoot the messenger. But this is what's happening. And if we still have the same chief of staff at IDF that's in power right now, who's directly responsible for doing nothing to allow Hamas to build up all those thousands of miles of tunnels and concrete and everything, all that funding coming from Gravy Train, funding coming from Qatar. Benjamin Netanyahu could have blocked those financial transactions, whatever reason why he didn't choose to do that. The chief of staff of the IDF, if he's still in power, when I move to Israel and I build my coalition of like-minded American Israeli Jews that wants to reinstitute a sane Kach Party initiative for all Jews to be treated equally, and any Arabs that want to live with us peaceably. I don't hate Arabs. I don't think Rabbi Kahane hated Arabs. He hated Arabs murdering Jews. And that's where I'm going, okay? Number 13, pass a bill for a Jewish and Arab civil rights law. What am I talking about? In 1964, I mentioned before, Dr. Martin King Jr. took 1,000 men against Washington, D.C. and said, enough is enough. I'm tired of black-only water fountains or white-only water fountains, or just, when I was a kid in kindergarten, a few weeks there were just white kids on the bus, and then it suddenly changed to black and white, and many white parents hated their kids to be in classroom with blacks. All that racial hatred was going on in the 60s and 70s. And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. lost his life over fighting for that. But he passed great legislation known as the 1964 Civil Rights Act. That 1964 Civil Rights Act should be closely mirrored for any kind of IDF core value standards. In other words, if you're a reservist and you decide to go out and protest against the duly elected government of Israel and demanding that Bibi resign and demanding the end of the war in Gaza, and you're thousands of people protesting, and you're not performing your reservist duties, you're out of here. You are put in a military prison and you are dishonorably discharged. I'm not sure if they do that in Israel, but you should lose all your benefits and everything else if that happens. Instead of giving them a waiver to go and protest during the time of war, that is crazy, at least for this American it is. But I have no right to criticize this crazy until I go to Israel and do something about crazy, okay? So number 14, suspend the legacy Supreme Court. We talk about judicial reform, huge unrest before the war and everything else. How dare, and even Biden administration in America was against reforming the judicial system. There's been a lot of Jews, majority of Jewish opinions say, Supreme Court as it is today needs to go. It needs to be reformed. They have no right to tell a duly elected candidate for an MKC, like me soon, I hope, you cannot run for office because you have ties with a Kach Party or whatever. But you allow a Jew-hating Arab whose loose ties with terrorism, that person can run just fine. This is what I'm talking about. You talking about apartheid? Well, there's apartheid among the members of the current Supreme Court in Israel. And there's a lot of apartheid in the Knesset when you have Arabs that hate Israel obtaining seats and building a political coalition there. That needs to be scrutinized too, very heavily. If I'm in control, this is what I want to do. I want to pass these legislation, rebuild the government against a U.S. framers' argument of what led to eventually the ratifying of the U.S. Constitution. Okay? Break the Knesset temporarily into 2 temporary houses of Congress like we have in the United States. I know we have X number of MKC. I understand a different political coalition. Sometimes a political party only lives long enough to get people elected, get major seats, be able to nominate a prime minister. That's how it works today. I don't know everything about it. It's very confusing to me. But I'm saying in this transitional, iterative process leading to a ratification of a written constitution that mirrors close to the United States, it just has to be exactly what within our constitution, because it may not apply, because our histories are different, for one thing. And I would like a Torah-centered focus too, but right now I'm focusing on the current secular government and doing something different that has been tried and failed in the status quo for many years, and many Jews have been murdered because of it. You know, like Rabbi Kahane said in America, if you don't do something different, there'll be a Holocaust in America. And you know, the Jews are in a horrible situation, anti-Semitism every corner in the United States. In the United States of America, the land I love, the land I was born and served my military service in for 20 years. They said it mirrors 1930s in Germany and Poland. That's horrible. That's a horrible indictment against my country. But it's truthful. So number 16, dissolve the 1948 British Empire parliamentary system. That's what I'm saying. It goes back to 1948. Dissolve it. Dissolve the basic law. Take the very best parts of basic law, and you include that in the Jewish Bill of Rights or the written constitution for Israel. Now listen to this. That's a bullet point. Transform existing members of the Knesset into co-equal House and Senate positions. Use existing major coalitions. Say if the Likud party is in power now as far as more seats, I know this changes almost monthly, every 6 months, every year, and then suddenly you lose that majority of the coalition government. You have to have new election, and they're talking about new elections in Israel right now. Okay, but if the Likud or Yamina party, whoever has more seats, they have a controlling position and say we control the Senate versus the House, or maybe both. Just like in the United States, sometimes you know the Republican Party controls the House only by a few seats. The Senate controls the Democrats control the Senate by more than a few seats. Sometimes both houses of government are Democrats, sometimes they're both Republican. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying have a Republican Democratic Party in Israel, because I don't feel comfortable with either of them. I'm essentially a federalist and an independent-minded person, okay? But that's to be discussed later, okay? But have an answer process to throw out the damn status quo, rebuild the government, hit the reset button, and mirror the best practices of the United States. Not what you see in the government today, but maybe what you saw in the time of President Reagan, maybe JFK, whoever you like to model, FDR, whoever you love as an American president of austerity, in history books, whatever. You decide, okay? Appoint the existing prime minister, whoever that is, as a temporary presidente of Israel. Now, we have a fake president right now, I think, in Tel Aviv. All that person does is a placeholder, and he decides who's going to be the next prime minister by the winning coalition in the parliament, okay? That's stupid, okay? It's a clown presidency, and he's very liberal and woke as they're in Tel Aviv in the first place, but having an executive branch run by an elected president. Who elects the president? Well, you have national elections. You see where I'm going? Just like America, but not quite. Okay? Number 18, pass a law to make Christian missionaries illegal in Israel. Why am I saying this? I care and I'm highly tolerant to other forms of religion or no religious beliefs at all. But missionaries, people, Christian pastors allowed to come in America to write in Yiddish, the Christian Bible in Yiddish, and give it to poor elderly Jews with suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever in nursing homes, and tell them Jesus was Mashiach, and doing it with children, and having Christian broadcasting, all that stuff for baptizing the name of Jesus and all that stuff. It's already illegal among minors, but it's not even strictly enforced. Talk to Rabbi Singer about it. He knows all about it. But make it illegal for Christians living in Israel or traveling to Israel for whatever reason, just to establish a church or whatever, and limit that to zero missionary evangelistic efforts will be permitted and tolerated in Israel. If you're caught doing it, you lose your passport, you lose your citizenship, you lose your right and benefits, entitlements to live in Israel. It's that simple. And a lot of people are said this, okay? Not just me. Number 18, suspend immediately all new requests for non-Jewish houses of worship. I'm sounding more and more like Rabbi Kahane, but listen to me. There's a lot of churches in Israel. There's a lot of mosques in Israel. There's a lot of synagogues in Israel. There's a Buddhist temple, I think, in Haifa, okay? A lot of these have been there for 2,000 years. A lot of them have been there in the Ottoman days, and they're historical landmarks. I'm not saying start tearing down mosques and churches. What I'm saying is no funding, no licensing for any part of Israel, north or south, for any new mosque or any new churches. Okay? Why? Because Israel is the only Jewish nation on the planet. Jews are there, just like Japanese have rights to say, we don't want a lot of Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses in our country. We don't want to have public federal funding for this stuff. Okay? Enough is enough. Israel is a very small country. And if all the Americans move from Brooklyn and Borough Park, and I encourage that, and Crown Heights, move to Israel and Aliyah and get ready for Mashiach, build a bridge for the Mashiach that doesn't lead nowhere, but leads somewhere for the Mashiach, then that is the right way to go. Okay? If anything, we need more Torah builders and not Torah destroyers, and Christians and Islamists or Torah destroyers. That's where I'm going. Okay? I'm not the only one saying this. Okay? Please don't shoot the messenger here. I'm not trying to be unkind or rude. Okay? This is very important. Number 20. In requests for foreign aid from the United States. Why? Because when you beg for money from the United States for warplanes, missiles, rockets, bombs, whatever you asking for free money from foreign aid from the United States, you are under their rules. So there's a tradition of this happening right now. U.S. presidents can demand land for peace agreements. Remember the Oslo Accords with Jimmy Carter? Remember George Walker Bush establishing Hamas as the government in Gaza Strip and kicking out Jews there in the disengagement law? Remember? That's been abolished recently. That's really good, whoever came up with that idea. And also the 1994 stupid peace treaty with Jordan, and before that, the peace treaty with Egypt. These treaties have only caused more pain and misery and murdered Jews under my watch of 59 years. You speak for yourself. You're there in the land of Israel, and I'm speaking primarily to people in Israel right now. Dual American citizens. Anyone that I'm saying and teaching and instructing and making these business recommendations to you for my future political career in Israel, if it means something to you, if it rings home, it makes sense, I want your feedback, okay? And I want your vote later on, okay? What I like the most here, and God is directing me to do this. I came up with this tonight, but I've been thinking about these ideas. Pass a bill for tribal Jewish statehood. What am I saying? Establishing regional tribal states according to the kingdom of Solomon. The golden age of Israel is best represented in a time when King Solomon was on his throne in control of Israel. We had the most land, we had the most territory. All 12 tribes were more or less represented in Eretz Israel, from Lebanon all the way down to Egypt there, all the way across Jordan and the Sinai Peninsula and that area there. That's what I'm saying. I know we cannot get all that territory back right now. That won't happen in time of Mashiach. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying go to war with Jordan. They go to war with us, we take the land away. But that's where I'm going is, we have Haifa and Ashdod and everything along the East Coast. Well, find out what tribal states were in that area at that time. Just break it out in a state and then call it that name. Do this for our ethnicity so we don't lose what it means to be a tribal Hebrew. Rabbis hate that because they don't want to say we're a race because we were targeted with genocide by Hitler. But I'm not afraid of Hitler. I'm not afraid of Hamas. I'm not afraid of these Jewish haters. I'm more fearful and tremble in knees before the Lord my God. That's where I'm coming from, okay? Number 22, suspend all treaties between Jordan and Egypt and reconcile policies. What am I talking about? Well, these peace treaties were based on false premises in the beginning, and they were forced upon Israel against the will of the Jewish people. The Jews did not want to leave Gaza Strip. They didn't want to uproot their generational families there. They've been there since the War of Egypt, around 1956-57 timeframe there, okay? They didn't want to leave. But U.S. presidents, because we take that money from the United States expects something in return and controlling your foreign policy and telling you how to live your life and telling you you are not a citizen of Israel in this area of the land that's disputed by a Palestinian, but a settler occupying their land. Go to AccuWeather, a weather channel. If you look up Jerusalem's Israel, the capital of Israel, you won't find it until you type in Jerusalem, Jerusalem, or Jerusalem, Jerusalem district. I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you. And the World Health Organization has Israel in Europe and has Palestine over the occupied area in the Middle East where Israel is. I'm not kidding you. This is how bad it is. So annex northern Israel, annex southern Israel, and divide it up. For instance, where Jerusalem have ben-Emmett there. It's always the Judean hills is already called ben-Emmett. That name is used for a certain province there. Well, codified in the original 12 tribes of Israel, where Moses said, this tribe will go here and this tribe will go there. That's what Moses said. That's what God told Moses to instruct. Sanctuary cities and everything else too, okay? Everything. This is how you can enforce Torah policy sanely, humanely, in a very common sense way, okay? As far as these peace treaties, temporarily recall all ambassadors from Egypt and Jordan, then have a re-engagement policy with these countries. If Egypt and Jordan wants a peace treaty with you over shared military arrangements and cooperation and things, economic, water rights in Jordan, all this, have them come to you begging you. You set the terms. Don't let the U.S. president set the terms. Don't let Egypt and Jordan force you into some treaty you will regret later. How many people regretted the stupid treaty in 1994? How many people are living in squalor and misery in Israel because of that stupid treaty with Jordan? And I already told you how they broke the status quo left and right when it convenienced the Arabs. There's no Jewish first policy in Israel, beginning with the idea. That's where I'm going. Have Egypt's president, have Jordan's king come to the new president of Israel with international diplomatic rights as a true president should, like President Biden is in France right now over the Normandy Day celebration and everything, memorial service, have that prestige more than a prime minister. You know, prime minister is so weak because they know you're temporary. You're not going to be there more than 2 years. That's the way they look at you, and that's why they can push you over, okay? Militarize the Gaza Strip. A lot of people saying this right now. Never give Gaza Strip over to any kind of Palestinian trope again, for obvious reasons. Obvious reasons, okay? Militarize Gaza Strip and invite both Arab and Jewish families that desire to live in peace there. So they were Arabs living there, I should say Egyptians. Most of the Gazans are Egyptians, by the way. They're not, no such thing as Palestinian. No such thing. I'm not going to get to Emperor Hadrian's curse in 1935. You can look it up. I have videos on that too. But I'm saying most of the people living in Rafah right now and squalor and everything else throughout Israel, and you got Tent City, but Adiyaf, these are all Egyptians. Most of them, and Syrians, and Jordanians. But mostly Egyptian. They just stayed there since the Egyptian War, and since Egypt lost the war that declared against Israel, we got the land of Gaza Strip, and it was given to Palestinians in 2005 when the U.S. forced that agreement, George Walker Bush. But right now, Hamas never ever, politically or as a worldview or philosophy, should ever exist or be spoken about. If you hear anyone at a protest rally or social media in Israel saying anything about Hamas or their views or their so-called charter that, you know, from the river to the sea, we shall be free, all this stuff, you arrest them, you detain them, you investigate them, and you deport their asses out of Israel forever. That's what I'm talking about. Okay? So militarize the place, let original Arabs go back there if they want to live in peace, and let original Jews go back there too, since the 1950s, okay? 1950 time range, okay? There have been Jews in the land of Eretz Israel forever. Some Jews have were never stolen away or exiled away to other countries that were allowed to return over a period of time. There's always been Jews in some corner of Israel. Hiding, but there's always been Jews there, okay? This is what I'm talking about. Wrapping this up, number 24, pass a bill for treason against the state. What am I talking about? We're in the time of war, and you have thousands of protesters in Tel Aviv demanding that Bibi step down, the prime minister acting like a president, you know, chief of the armed forces, you know, commander of the armed forces, acting in that kind of war council kind of way, and you got people protesting the war there in a time of war. And they're doing the same thing, the same messaging, what's in the enemy's camp of Hamas. This is treason. And when you refuse to be drafted in the IDF in a time, especially in a time of war, it is also treason and punishable by fines and jail sentences. That's what I'm saying. The new Department of Justice, along with the executive branch and the legislative branch of Congress in Israel, the new government I'm proposing, will decide these treason cases, okay? Pass a bill to arrest any IDF reservist who refuses to report to duty. And in America, if you're AWOL, you lose your security clearance and you're put in military prison. It's that simple. Draft dodgers in the Vietnam conflict in the 70s, they either ran away to Canada or they're out in the streets and became a part of Woodstock. And many of them were not arrested for that. Okay, many of them people got bogus excuses to get out of the war. Okay, in that nonsense, there were a lot of reservists that were allowed by the chief staff of the IDF. They were allowed waivers or whatever to go and protest, even though it was in time of war. That is insane for this step. Okay, pass a bill to annex any property in which a terrorist was proven to have planning logistics within a domiciled residence. Right now, the IDF will demolish a house or business that was tied to a convicted terrorist against a Jewish civilian or Jewish individuals or group of Jews, namely murdering, using bombs and explosives, whatever. Okay, Hamas or Al-Aqsa Brigade's counter-terrorist Islamic terrorist activities. The house is demolished. It took a long time after R. Fuller was murdered for the Supreme Court to agree that the IDF can demolish a house of the individual's family that murdered him. What I'm saying, not only detain family members under a criminal investigation, deport the entire family, the entire Maspoka, all the indirect and nuclear family, mother and father, grandparents, cousins, whatever, that was tied to that one or two terrorist actors from that family. Everyone has an imam that's preaching hatred. Find out who that imam in that local mosque that's spewing that hatred and indoctrinating young people. It happens in kindergarten and by Hamas in Gaza Strip. We have videos of this. If you find out about it, deport all of them. No, don't keep any more Palestinians in prison for a future prisoner exchange. If they commit murder, capital punishment. If they try to commit murder, deport them and destroy their house, and then allow that real estate to be opened up either for IDF military purposes or for a new Jewish family homeland. But anyway, it will be annexed as part of Israel proper. That's where I'm going. This is how you prevent it. This is the punishment that you need to have for bad coincidences of human behavior. Enforce existing draft laws where applicable with few exceptions. You hear, I saw something about some ultra-Orthodox Hasidim, whatever. They were not yeshiva students anymore, but they were protesting being drafted. There's a lot of Hasidim that have willfully gone in to serve at IDF. It's the law in Israel right now. You have to be drafted. You have to serve 3 years. Everyone served 3 years at least, and it's something to be proud of to be a veteran. I'm proud to be a veteran. But we need to have laws and punishments like this enforced ultimately to the Department of Justice and the new Supreme Court. And all protests during the time of war, this is you have quarantines and martial law established in a time of terrorist activity. In World War II, we actually put in entertainment centers American, Japanese citizens because we were afraid they were a security threat. Okay? This has happened. Number 30, call new elections for proposed constitutional government. So once all these laws are passed and draft, once they're passed, get ready to implement. I don't know how long this is going to take. Hopefully not as long as the status quo has been enforced. Number 31, hold national elections every 4 years period, but you decide. Have term limits for your Congress members. I strongly suggest. We used to have that in the United States until the states gave those rights over to federal government. Hold local governor election in each state. If you have tribal state, 12 tribal states in Israel, northern and southern Israel, you have governors there, you have mayors acting as governors, and you have local elections there too, okay? That will lead to national elections for Congress and things of that nature. Sometimes you have state primary and general elections for state level legislatures and national legislatures in America, okay? This is how you decide if the House or Senate goes to Republican or Democrat in these local state elections. Okay? Number 33, all provisions and rights not specified in the new Constitution will be decided upon at a state level. So this is how it should be done in the United States, but not done correctly. If it's not called out strictly, verbatim in the U.S. Constitution, then it's implied it's a state right. Like, for instance, definition of marriage. Definition of when a fetus is actually considered has certain civil rights to be born, about abortion and things like that kind of thing. Certain debates over the death penalty should be decided at state level. Federal government provides guidelines and recommendations, for the states control it at a local level. Population is much bigger in the United States. We have more diversification here. But in Israel, the same kind of template for success that's worked more than 200 years in the United States should work. Something I did not provide enough detail on, I said, abolish the current Supreme Court. Don't try to reform it. It's systemically wrong. It's wrong and will never work. How does the Supreme Court exist in the United States? The President of the United States, whoever wins the election of the President of the United States, whether it's conservative, liberal, independent, whatever, politically speaking in Israel, they nominate a Supreme Court justice for someone who's about to vacate or retire their seat. And there's other arguments, should they be for life in the Supreme Court or not. But the main thing, once you have an executive branch, a president, he nominates a person or persons for a Supreme Court to fill those vacant seats. It goes before Congress. They have trials. And I did mention this earlier. I forgot. Then they can actually be nominated to be a Supreme Court justice and serve out their term, their tenure of office. Okay? How do you like these ideas? I'm dead serious about it. I even as a retiree, in 6 years, I'll be, around 66, 67. I'll be an elderly person. But, I want to offer something back to Israel. I should have been in Israel years ago. But for whatever reason, I was just not ready to pull that trigger. I love Rabbi Kahane. I don't agree with everything. But he was more right than he was wrong. The main thing is I love my government here, and I think my government will work better in Israel than a stupid status quo and parliamentary system. Okay? A lot of Jews hate it, but they just stuck in a system and they just repeat it over and over again. Break out of it, folks. This is ben-Emmett. I'm serious. When I move to Ashdod with my family, I'll go to find a new home synagogue, a Kach shul. I always said I'm a proud, self-declared Kach Jew. I want fair Kach Jewish representation in the Knesset as well. I want a chief Kach Hakam, along with a chief rabbinate that makes all these Torah decisions for right of return and everything else. That's what I want. I want to run at least one term for MK and try to get these things done. And who knows, maybe my daughter can run for MK, or maybe be a president of Israel one day. I don't know, or an astronaut. But anyway, take care, Shalom Aleichem. This is the end of this special political announcement. Yes, I am running for a member of Knesset to hold a seat for a Reform Kach Party coalition with Yamina or some other conservative Torah Center party there. Initially, we're going to use the parliamentary system, and we're going to pass laws, reform the current government, use what it works best for the Jew. If you're not raising a quality life statement for a Jew, whatever you're doing is vain and stupid. I'm not talking about religion either. I'm talking about making Israel great again for the Jewish people. Or for everyone that loves the Jewish people. There's a lot of people in Israel that love the Jewish people, and a lot of people hate the Jews. Get them out. Find more Arabs and more Christians or whoever, Buddhists, whoever, Hindu. If they love the Jewish people and they love the Israeli flag, and they love the benefits of being in Israel compared to other countries, you love the geography and history and everything else, hey, you're my brother and sister, and you can come and have tea with me anytime you want to. ben-Emmett signing out. Stay tuned for future updates. Take care, and I'll see you around town soon. Maybe Ashdod. I hope so. I told my wife today I was almost in tears about everything going on in Israel. I'm becoming quite emotional about it. I want to be there. My soul is already there. My Nefesh Yehudis has been there for quite some time. I want to bring my body and quantum tangle it to where my soul will be the rest of my existence. 120 years, I hope. Take care. Goodbye.